From the crowded streets where women first raised their banners for the right to vote, to the fiery protests that shook governments in the mid-20th century, to the bold declarations of identity and freedom in the 1990s, feminism has never been silent. It has surged forward in waves, each one reshaping society, each one leaving behind a legacy of courage and defiance. But the story does not end in the past. Today, we stand in the midst of a new revolution, a digital revolution. In an age where hashtags can spark global movements, where voices once silenced now echo across continents, and where the struggle for equality has entered the virtual battlefield, the question remains, is this the dawn of feminism's most powerful wave yet? This is not just history. It is our present, and it is our future. To understand the fourth wave, we must travel through the struggles of the past, uncover the voices that dare to rise, and trace the journey that has carried us here. Because feminism is not a single fight. It is a story of humanity itself. Globe Showing Europe Africa, welcome to History Vault. If you believe history is not just about the past, but about the battles still shaping our world, then you are in the right place. Subscribe now, join this journey, and let's uncover the hidden truths that textbooks left behind. Because the waves of change never stop, they only grow stronger. And tonight, you are about to witness how feminism rose from the margins to become a digital revolution that history will never forget. History has always been shaped by voices that dare to rise against silence. To understand the digital revolution of the fourth wave of feminism, one must travel back through time, into the earlier waves that gave women the courage, the structure, and the vocabulary to demand equality. Each wave of feminism, though different in its battles and methods, was a stepping stone that made today's online activism possible. Without the struggles of the past, the digital hashtags of the present would hold little meaning. The first wave of feminism emerged in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, a period when women were seen largely as extensions of their fathers or husbands, denied property rights, education, and the most fundamental political voice, the right to vote. In Britain, figures such as Emmeline Pankhurst and the suffragettes defied social conventions, chaining themselves to railings, organizing marches, and enduring imprisonment. In the United States, leaders like Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton challenged a system that had long silenced women. Their struggle was not simply for a piece of paper called the ballot. It was for recognition as full citizens of their nations. The victory of suffrage did not come easily. It was a long war of persistence, sacrifice, and resilience. But when women finally entered the polling stations, history changed course. The first wave set in motion a powerful precedent. That women, united by common cause, could shake the foundations of law and tradition. The second wave came in the mid-20th century, fueled by the winds of World War II and the cultural upheaval of the 1960s and 70s. The war had pushed women into factories, offices, and roles traditionally held by men, only for them to be pushed back into domestic spaces once peace returned. But women had tasted economic independence, and they would not let it go quietly. Thinkers like Betty Friedan, whose book The Feminine Mystique exposed the emptiness many women felt in suburban homes, sparked debates about equality in workplaces, education, and reproductive rights. The rallying cry became not just about voting, but about living free from systemic oppression. Second-wave feminism fought for legislation, such as the Equal Pay Act, and also challenged the culture of patriarchy itself. For the first time, the personal became political. Issues like domestic violence, sexual harassment, and marital rape were dragged out of the shadows into public consciousness. Then came the third wave in the 1990s, a reaction both to the victories and the shortcomings of the earlier movements. While the first and second waves had often been criticized for centering the experiences of middle-class white women, the third wave embraced diversity. Intersectionality became the key term, acknowledging that women experience oppression differently depending on race, class, sexuality, and culture. Figures like Kimberly Crenshaw articulated how overlapping systems of discrimination could not be addressed by a single narrative of womanhood. The third wave was also infused with new cultural energy, drawing from music, literature, and pop culture. Riot girl bands, feminist zines, and outspoken media voices challenged stereotypes with humor, irony, and defiance. The third wave told women they could be both feminine and feminist, that empowerment was not about fitting a mold, but about breaking it. These three waves, though distinct, were interconnected chapters of a long, unfinished struggle. The suffragettes had demanded political rights. The second wave demanded social and economic equality, and the third wave demanded inclusivity and diversity. By the early 2000s, feminism had already achieved major victories, but there remained deep frustrations. Violence against women persisted, wage gaps remained, and cultural sexism thrived in subtle and not-so-subtle forms. The internet was beginning to reshape communication, offering an unfiltered space where voices could gather beyond borders. What the pamphlets of the suffragettes and the rallies of the second wave had done in their time, the internet was now poised to do at lightning speed. When the fourth wave began to emerge around 2012, it was not a revolution born out of nowhere. It was the echo of past struggles, amplified by new technology. The suffragettes had used newspapers and marches. The second wave had used television debates and campus protests. The third wave had used magazines, music, and art. But the fourth wave had something far more powerful: social media platforms that connected millions instantly. Twitter hashtags could spread across continents within hours. Viral videos could expose harassment and injustice with undeniable evidence. The fourth wave inherited the courage of its predecessors but transformed activism into something borderless, digital, and relentless. Seen through the lens of history, the fourth wave is not an isolated phenomenon. It is the natural continuation of women's centuries-long struggle for recognition. Each wave carried forward not just victories, but also lessons. From the suffragettes, the fourth wave inherited persistence. From the second wave, it inherited the courage to challenge systemic structures. From the third wave, it inherited the language of diversity and intersectionality. Together, these echoes of the past form the backbone of the digital revolution that defines today's feminism. Thus, the history of feminism is not divided chapters closed with finality, but continuous narrative, each wave rising higher than the last. And now, as the fourth wave surges forward, it carries within it the spirit of every woman who ever raised her voice. From the streets of London to the rallies of Washington, from the Riot Girl concerts to the hashtags trending worldwide, history did not prepare women for silence. It prepared them for this moment, when voices would rise louder than ever, reverberating across screens and into the future. By the dawn of the 21st century, the world had changed dramatically. The internet was no longer a luxury of the elite. It had become a global network shaping culture, communication, and politics. Platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube had begun to redefine the way people interacted, while blogs and independent websites created new spaces for voices outside the mainstream media. Into this digital landscape entered the fourth wave of feminism, an uprising that was not confined to the streets of one city or the parliaments of one country, but a movement that unfolded simultaneously across borders, cultures, and languages. The early signs of the fourth wave emerged around 2012, when the internet became a battleground for debates on sexism, harassment, and gender equality. Young women, often labeled as digital natives, began to challenge traditional structures of media and politics. Unlike earlier generations, they did not need to wait for newspapers to publish their opinions or universities to host their debates. They could log on to social media and share their voices instantly with millions. This accessibility transformed activism into something faster, rawer, and more inclusive. One of the earliest sparks of the fourth wave came with campaigns that directly addressed everyday sexism. In the UK, Laura Bates launched the Everyday Sexism Project, a digital platform where women shared personal stories of harassment, inequality, and discrimination. What began as a small project quickly evolved into a global archive of experiences, revealing the sheer scale of issues that were often dismissed as isolated incidents. The digital nature of this project made it impossible to ignore. Thousands of stories flooded in, forcing societies to confront a truth many had long denied, that sexism was not rare, but systemic. At the same time, social media began to play a central role in amplifying feminist causes. Hashtags became the new protest banners. They were concise, powerful, and viral. A hashtag could carry a movement across continents in a matter of hours, uniting voices that might never have met in physical spaces. For example, hashtag #YesAllWomen emerged in response to misogynistic violence, allowing women to share their experiences of sexism and harassment, proving that these were not isolated grievances, but part of a larger, global pattern. But the defining moment for fourth wave came with the eruption of the #MeToo movement in 2017. Though the phrase had originally been coined years earlier by activist Tarana Burke, it exploded on social media when women around the world began sharing their stories of sexual harassment and assault using the hashtag. What followed was nothing short of revolutionary. Millions of women and men broke their silence, from Hollywood celebrities to factory workers, from journalists to students. The sheer weight of these voices could not be dismissed. Powerful men, once untouchable, face exposure and accountability. The phrase Me Too became not just a slogan but a global reckoning, showing the full force of the fourth wave in action. Unlike previous feminist movements, the fourth wave was uniquely decentralized. There was no single leader, no single manifesto, and no single nation at its core. Instead, its power lay in its ability to connect people across divides. A student in India speaking about harassment on public transport could find solidarity with a professional in New York sharing a similar story. A woman in Egypt fighting for freedom of dress codes could amplify her struggle with allies in Europe or Latin America. The internet made geography irrelevant. Injustice in one corner of the globe could ignite outrage everywhere else. But the fourth wave was not limited to issues of harassment and assault. It tackled a broad range of concerns: the persistent gender wage gap, body shaming, reproductive rights, LGBTQ plus inclusivity, and the representation of women in politics and media. The movement also brought renewed focus on intersectionality, ensuring that feminism did not speak only for privileged groups, but for women of all races, classes, sexualities, and backgrounds. Digital platforms allowed marginalized voices, often ignored by mainstream narratives, to rise and lead conversations. One of the most striking aspects of the fourth wave was its creativity. Memes, viral videos, blogs, and podcasts became tools of resistance. Art and humor were often used to dismantle sexist narratives, making feminist messages more accessible and engaging to younger audiences. Campaigns like #HeForShe, championed by figures such as Emma Watson, encouraged men to actively participate in dismantling patriarchy, further broadening the appeal of the movement. The digital stage allowed feminism to move beyond academic circles and into everyday conversations, reshaping popular culture itself. Yet, as with every wave of feminism, the fourth wave also faced challenges and criticisms. The same platforms that amplified feminist voices also amplified hate. Online harassment, trolling, and threats targeted activists, often with shocking levels of aggression. Critics argued that #activism was shallow, claiming that social media campaigns could raise awareness but not create lasting change. However, the reality was far more complex. While it is true that hashtags alone could not rewrite laws or restructure economies, they did something equally powerful. They shifted public consciousness. They broke taboos, shattered silences, and created a climate where policymakers, corporations, and institutions could no longer ignore the demands of gender equality. The historical significance of the fourth wave lies in this transformation. Whereas earlier waves often required years of marches, speeches, and lobbying to reach mainstream attention, the fourth wave could ignite global conversations in days. A single viral post could influence debates in parliaments, boardrooms, and universities alike. History had never before witnessed activism on such a scale, moving at such a speed. Thus, the birth of the fourth wave must be understood as both a continuation and a departure from the past. It continued the legacy of earlier feminist struggles, carrying forward demands for justice and equality. But it departed from tradition in its methods, embracing digital tools that democratized activism like never before. For the first time in history, every individual with access to the internet could contribute to a global movement. The fourth wave was not the voice of a few. It was the chorus of millions. In many ways, the fourth wave is a mirror of the world it inhabits, fast-paced, interconnected, and shaped by technology. But beneath the screens and hashtags lies the same ancient struggle, the fight for dignity, freedom, and equality. What makes this wave unique is not its goals, but its tools. It is feminism shaped by the digital age, born out of both frustration and hope, determined to rewrite history one click, one post, and one shared story at a time. When history looks back at the fourth wave of feminism, it will not be remembered for fiery speeches in Parliament or declarations written in newspapers. Instead, it will be remembered for something deceptively simple, a hashtag. In the digital age, hashtags became the banners under which millions gathered. The rallying cries written not on fabric, but on screens. They were short, powerful, and capable of transcending borders with astonishing speed. They turned individual grievances into collective revolutions and personal stories into historical testimony. The idea of using hashtags for activism began modestly. On platforms like Twitter, hashtags were originally a way to group conversations. But feminists saw their potential as tools of mobilization. With a single symbol, hashtag, words could be transformed into movements. What would have once required years of organizing could now be achieved overnight. Hashtags made feminism viral. Take the example of hashtag #YesAllWomen. In 2014, after a misogynistic attack in California, the phrase emerged as a response to the idea that not all men were responsible for violence against women. Women across the world use a hashtag to share stories of harassment, discrimination, and fear they experience simply for being women. Within days, millions of posts flooded social media. Each post was unique, but together they painted a devastating portrait of a global problem. What had long been treated as isolated incidents was revealed to be a universal experience, connecting women from Los Angeles to Lahore, from Paris to Manila. The hashtag became more than a trend. It was a revelation, a shared cry for recognition and change. Then came hashtag MeToo, the most iconic movement of the fourth wave. Though Tarana Burke had coined the phrase years earlier to support survivors of sexual violence, it exploded on Twitter in 2017 after high-profile revelations in Hollywood. The hashtag spread like wildfire, with millions of women and men coming forward to share their experiences. From film studios to corporate offices, from schools to factories, powerful men who had long operated with impunity were suddenly being held accountable. The sheer scale of the movement was staggering. In the first 24 hours alone, over 500,000 tweets carried the hashtag, and it quickly spread to more than 85 countries. What made hashtag MeToo extraordinary was not just its reach, but its impact. This was not a passing trend. It had tangible consequences. CEOs resigned, politicians faced investigations, laws were revisited, and conversations about workplace harassment became unavoidable. In many countries, companies instituted new policies to protect employees from abuse. Survivors who had been silenced for years finally found solidarity and courage in seeing their stories echoed by millions. The world could no longer deny the scale of sexual violence, and the digital chorus of hashtag MeToo made sure of it. But hashtag MeToo was not alone. Other hashtags carried their own revolutions. Hashtag TimesUp built on the momentum of MeToo, focusing on systemic reforms, especially in workplaces. Hashtag WhyIStayed gave survivors of domestic violence a platform to explain why leaving abusive relationships was not as simple as outsiders often assumed, dismantling victim-blaming narratives. Hashtag Bring Back Our Girls, launched in Nigeria after the kidnapping of schoolgirls by Boko Haram, went global, showing how feminist digital activism was not just about gender equality, but also about human rights, security, and education. Virality became a weapon of justice. A hashtag that went viral did more than spread awareness. It forced institutions to respond. Media outlets picked up trending topics. Governments faced pressure, and corporations realized silence was no longer an option. In many ways, the virality of hashtags democratized power. A single tweet from an ordinary person could spark a movement that echoed in parliaments and boardrooms across the globe. Yet, this power also came with complexity. Hashtag activism was sometimes dismissed as slacktivism, a form of engagement critics argue was shallow, merely clicking share without engaging in deeper political work. But this criticism missed the point. While it is true that not every tweet translated into policy reform, hashtags played a critical role in shaping cultural narratives. They made private pain public, turning whispers into roars. They created communities of support for survivors who had long felt isolated. They also created pressure, and history shows that public pressure often precedes legislative change. What truly distinguished the fourth wave from earlier feminist movements was speed. In the past, building momentum could take years of organizing marches, publishing books, or lobbying governments. But in the digital age, momentum could be created overnight. A video uploaded to YouTube could go viral within hours. A thread on Twitter could reach millions within a day, and an Instagram post could spark global discussions in a matter of minutes. This acceleration gave feminism a new kind of urgency and visibility. Moreover, hashtags allowed for intersectionality to flourish in ways that earlier feminist waves had struggled with. Movements like #SayHerName highlighted the specific struggles of Black women facing police violence, ensuring their voices were not lost in broader feminist narratives. #Anoniminos, emerging from Latin America, protested femicide and gender-based violence, becoming one of the most powerful feminist cries in Spanish-speaking countries. These movements showed how digital feminism was not monolithic, but a tapestry of interconnected struggles, each amplified by the viral power of the internet. Another strength of hashtags was their adaptability. A hashtag could be localized to reflect cultural or political context while still being part of a global conversation. For example, while #MeToo was dominant in the West, countries like China adapted the movement under censorship restrictions, using creative alternatives like #RiceBunny, which phonetically mimic MeToo in Mandarin, to bypass government controls. This resilience showed that digital activism could thrive even under oppressive regimes. At the same time, online virality exposed the darker side of digital activism. Troll armies, hate campaigns, and coordinated disinformation efforts often targeted feminists and activists. Women who spoke out online frequently faced harassment, doxing, and threats, sometimes forcing them to retreat from digital spaces. This backlash revealed that while the internet empowered voices, it also exposed them to new dangers. The fourth wave was thus a double-edged sword, a platform of liberation and a battlefield of hostility. Nevertheless, the power of hashtags cannot be overstated. They transformed the way history is recorded. Future historians will not rely solely on newspapers or speeches to study the fourth wave. They will sift through millions of tweets, posts, and videos. Each hashtag captured not only the demands of the time, but the emotions, solidarity, and resistance of millions. In this sense, hashtags are the fourth wave's monuments. Just as earlier waves left behind pamphlets, marches, and landmark legislation, the fourth wave will be remembered through its viral campaigns. These digital monuments are etched not in stone, but in cyberspace, where they continue to inspire new generations of activists. Every revolution meets resistance, and the fourth wave of feminism has been no exception. If the digital sphere has amplified voices like never before, it has also opened the floodgates to new forms of silencing, backlash, and polarization. To understand the complexities of this movement, one must look not only at its triumphs, but also at the shadows that loom over its progress. These challenges shape the debate around whether digital feminism represents a lasting revolution or a fleeting online trend. One of the most frequent critiques of fourth-wave feminism lies in the accusation of slacktivism. This term refers to activism that is considered superficial, where liking, sharing, or retweeting posts on social media substitutes for real-world action. Critics argue that while millions might tweet a hashtag, far fewer actually march in protest, donate to causes, or pressure lawmakers for concrete reforms. The 2014 hashtag Bring Back Our Girls campaign, which drew attention to the kidnapping of Nigerian schoolgirls by Boko Haram, spread rapidly across social media and even received endorsements from celebrities and political leaders. Yet skeptics point out that the digital outrage did little to resolve the crisis on the ground. Such examples fuel the perception that hashtag activism is symbolic rather than substantive. But this critique misses a deeper point. History teaches us that symbols have power. Just as suffragettes use banners and slogans, the fourth wave uses hashtags as rallying cries. The visibility of movement cannot be underestimated. Awareness itself is a form of action. Still, the tension between digital gestures and material change remains a constant debate, both within and outside feminist circles. Another challenge has been the backlash from those who see feminism as a threat to traditional structures of power. Online spaces have become battlegrounds where trolls, misogynists, and organized groups use harassment to silence activists. Women who speak out, especially on platforms like Twitter, often receive waves of abuse ranging from insults to death threats. This digital harassment is not merely an annoyance. It reflects the deeper cultural resistance to women's equality. Historically, whenever women pushed for rights, opposition rose to meet them. Suffragettes were ridiculed. Second-wave feminists were dismissed as radicals. And now digital feminists face cyberbullying on a global scale. The tools have changed, but the underlying pattern of resistance is strikingly familiar. Complicating matters further is the phenomenon of cancel culture. Within the fourth wave itself, debates rage about accountability, forgiveness, and power dynamics. Some argue that canceling individuals for problematic statements or actions is a necessary act of justice, a way of holding the powerful accountable. Others believe it fosters fear, silences dialogue, and creates division rather than unity. The question becomes, when does calling out injustice transform into a cycle of hostility that undermines the movement's inclusivity? In many ways, the fourth wave is still struggling to balance its passion for justice with its need for compassion and resilience. The digital divide adds another layer of complexity. While the fourth wave presents itself as global, not everyone has equal access to the internet or digital tools. Feminist voices from rural communities, poorer nations, or regions with restricted internet freedom often remain underrepresented. Activists in the global south point out that while Western movements like #MeToo gain international headlines, equally pressing issues, such as forced marriages, access to education, or basic health care for women, receive far less attention. In this sense, the digital fourth wave risks reproducing the same inequalities it seeks to dismantle. Intersectionality, one of its core principles, demands that diverse voices be heard. Yet the structures of global technology often amplify the privileged while muting the marginalized. Governments, too, have taken note of this digital activism, sometimes responding with force. In countries where women use social media to protest, authorities have surveilled, censored, or even jailed activists. The Arab Spring, which saw women participate boldly in protests and campaigns, also demonstrated how fragile digital freedom can be. The very platforms that empower voices are often monitored, turning spaces of resistance into spaces of vulnerability. This tension between empowerment and exposure haunts the fourth wave and raises questions about the future of digital rights. Critics also argue that the fourth wave sometimes prioritizes personal narratives over systemic reform. The widespread sharing of experiences, as seen in the #MeToo movement, certainly broke silences and shifted public discourse. Yet skeptics question whether storytelling alone can dismantle the deeper structures of patriarchy embedded in law, economy, and politics. They point out that while some high-profile men lost careers after public accusations, structural reforms to workplace safety, harassment laws, or gender pay gaps remain slow and uneven. Is the fourth wave at risk of becoming more about viral moments than sustained change? Or is this critique itself an echo of history, where every feminist movement is accused of being too radical or not radical enough? Despite these challenges, the very existence of these debates shows the vitality of the movement. History's great revolutions were never neat or uncontested. They were messy, filled with contradictions and constantly evolving. The fourth wave is no different. Its critics may see slacktivism, backlash, and chaos, but its supporters see resilience, creativity, and progress. Like every wave before it, the fourth wave is writing its story not in perfect harmony, but in the clash of voices that demand attention. Ultimately, the critiques force the movement to grow. By confronting issues of inclusivity, digital divide, and real-world impact, the fourth wave refines its methods and sharpens its goals. Just as suffragettes learned from setbacks and second-wave feminists navigated resistance, the fourth wave is finding its way through the maze of modern challenges. The digital revolution in feminism is not flawless, but it is alive, and that very aliveness ensures it remains a historical force. Ultimately, hashtags did what traditional activism often struggled to achieve. They made feminism accessible. A young student, a factory worker, a mother, or an artist, anyone with an internet connection could join the conversation. They could add their story, amplify others, or simply show solidarity. Each post became a small act of resistance, and together they built a revolution. Thus, The story of the fourth wave cannot be told without acknowledging the extraordinary power of hashtags and virality. They were not just trends, they were turning points. They redefined how movements are built, how voices are heard, and how history itself unfolds. In the age of digital activism, the revolution was not only televised, it was tweeted, shared, and hashtagged into existence. Every wave of feminism has left a mark upon history, reshaping the possibilities of women's lives and redefining the fabric of society. The first wave secured the vote. The second reshaped laws and workplace structures. The third challenged rigid identities. And the fourth has harnessed digital power to amplify voices across borders. But the question that now stands before us is this: what legacy will the fourth wave leave behind, and how will it shape the future of feminism in the digital age? To answer this, one must understand that history does not judge movements solely by their moments of triumph, but by the ripples they create across generations. The fourth wave's use of technology has permanently transformed the way activism is organized and remembered. For the first time, the archive of feminist struggle is being written in real time, stored not in dusty libraries or rare pamphlets, but in tweets, hashtags, videos, podcasts, and digital communities. Future historians will not only study speeches and books, but also screenshots, viral posts, and the digital footprints of countless women and allies who dare to speak out. This democratization of history itself is revolutionary. It means that no longer are movements recorded only through the eyes of elites. The voices of ordinary women, from students to workers to mothers, are preserved in the very platforms they use daily. The legacy of the fourth wave also lies in its insistence on intersectionality. Unlike earlier movements, which sometimes overlook issues of race, class, sexuality, or disability, the digital era has made exclusion far harder to ignore. A post from a marginalized group can gain traction globally, demanding attention from mainstream feminism. This global interconnectedness means that the struggles of women in South America, Africa, or South Asia can no longer be sidelined in favor of Western narratives alone. The fourth wave has begun to weave a more inclusive story, though the work is far from complete. If carried forward, this could be its greatest contribution, a feminism that truly reflects the diversity of women's lives. At the same time, the legacy of the fourth wave will be measured by whether digital activism translates into long-term structural reform. Awareness has surged, voices have been heard, but laws, institutions, and cultural norms often move at a slower pace. The challenge for the future is ensuring that viral outrage becomes institutional change. For instance, the hashtag MeToo movement sparked conversations across workplaces, schools, and governments, but the deeper transformation lies in whether legal frameworks adapt to better protect women from harassment and violence. Similarly, campaigns for equal pay, reproductive rights, and political representation must be sustained beyond the immediacy of online debates. If the fourth wave succeeds in bridging the gap between digital visibility and policy action, it will be remembered as a decisive force in shaping the 21st century. Looking forward, one of the defining questions is how feminism will adapt to the rapidly changing technological landscape. Artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and new digital economies are already reshaping human lives. Will feminism harness these tools to further empower women, or will new inequalities emerge within them? Consider, for example, the gender biases already present in AI algorithms or the lack of women in tech leadership. The fourth wave has set the stage for these debates, but the future waves, perhaps a fifth or sixth, will have to confront them head-on. In this sense, the fourth wave is both a revolution and a bridge, preparing the ground for struggles yet to come. Education also plays a critical role in shaping the legacy of this movement. Unlike earlier eras, young people now grow up with immediate access to feminist discussions online. A teenager scrolling through TikTok or Instagram may stumble upon conversations about gender equality, body positivity, or LGBTQ+ rights in a way that previous generations could not have imagined. This normalization of feminist ideas in everyday digital culture could be one of the most enduring contributions of the fourth wave. By embedding the language of equality into the digital lives of the young, the movement ensures that the next generation inherits not only its victories, but also its unfinished battles. Yet the future is not without its perils. Digital memory is fragile, Platforms rise and fall. What happens to the history of feminist activism if Twitter collapses, if videos are deleted, if algorithms bury content? Preserving the legacy of the fourth wave requires intentional archiving, education, and storytelling beyond the digital platforms themselves. Otherwise, the movement risks losing its own history to the fleeting nature of online trends. To safeguard its legacy, feminists must ensure that their digital struggles are recorded, studied, and passed down with the same care as earlier generations' letters, books, and speeches. The cultural legacy of the fourth wave also lies in reshaping the very idea of what power looks like. For centuries, power was associated with kings, emperors, presidents, generals, figures who commanded armies and ruled nations. Today, the power of a single viral post, the courage of a whistleblower, or the resilience of women who share their stories can rival traditional forms of influence. This shift from hierarchical to network power is not only a feature of feminism, but of our age itself. And feminism's role in pioneering this transformation ensures its place at the heart of modern history. What will the future remember about the fourth wave? Perhaps it will recall the way women from every corner of the globe rose up in unison to say, "Enough!" Perhaps it will remember the faces of survivors who refused to be silenced, the campaigns that crossed borders with unprecedented speed, and the solidarity that emerged in digital communities. Or perhaps, centuries from now, the fourth wave will be seen as just the beginning, the first step into a new era where equality is not a demand but a lived reality. In the end, the future of feminism is unwritten. But what is clear is that the fourth wave has already shifted the terrain. It has carved out new spaces for voices, challenged power structures in innovative ways, and ensured that the question of gender equality remains central to the global conversation. Whether the future brings new waves or new struggles, the fourth wave will stand as a historical turning point, a digital revolution that dared to reimagine what was possible. And so, the story of feminism continues, a story not of final victories, but of ongoing battles, not of static legacies, but of living traditions. The fourth wave is not the end of history, but part of its pulse, a reminder that as long as voices rise, equality will remain a goal worth fighting for. And so, the journey of feminism across its four waves comes full circle. From the first voices that demanded the right to vote, to the fiery protests that redefined gender roles, to the bold declarations of identity in the third wave, and finally, to the digital revolution of the fourth wave. Each chapter tells us that progress is never given, it is fought for. These waves are not just moments in history. They are echoes of courage that continue to shape our world today. As we look back, one truth becomes clear. Feminism is not a finished story, but a living struggle. Its legacy is carried not only by the icons whose names we remember, but also by the countless women and men who dare to believe in equality, who raised their voices when silence was easier, and who chose justice over fear. And now, the future lies in our hands. The fourth wave has shown us that a single voice can spark a movement, that solidarity can cross borders, and that history can be written in the language of the people. But it has also reminded us that the fight is far from over. Inequality still exists. Violence still silences. Prejudice still lingers. The question is, will we rise to continue the struggle? The story of feminism is not theirs. It is ours. It is yours. Every time you speak against injustice, every time you amplify the voices of the unheard, every time you demand fairness, you become part of this history. Globe showing Europe, Africa, so let us carry forward the courage of the first wave, the resilience of the second, the inclusivity of the third, and the global vision of the fourth. Because feminism is not just about the past. It is about the future we are building, together. Backhand index pointing right if this story inspired you. Join us in uncovering more hidden truths of history. Subscribe to History Vault. Share this documentary with others, and keep the conversation alive. History is not just something we inherit. It is something we create. Because one day, when future generations look back, they will ask not only what feminism was, but what role we played in shaping its legacy. The waves of feminism have brought us here. The next wave begins with you.